walking!
It's 5 months since Becky's car crash.
She had an accident and she's got a bad head.
Becky's left Addenbrooke's and is now a resident in a nearby rehabilitation centre. Husband Justin has given up work as a lorry driver to spend every day helping her recovery.
Until you're actually put in this situation, perhaps you don't realise just how much that, you know, you rely on each other and, you know, how happy you are.
Becky's current diagnosis is one of a minimally conscious state, where a patient shows awareness of themselves and their surroundings. She may continue to make improvements, but ultimately she'll require full-time care.
We got this far and we don't know how far things are going to go. We don't know if Becky will be walking or talking or what progression we'll get. We just hope that these little tiny steps just gradually build up and she can sit and speak to the boys.
For the last 5 months, Justin's mother has been helping look after the 3 boys, 7 days a week.
Well, they miss Mum. I mean, this week one of them said, I miss my mummy. And I said, oh no, I miss my mummy and daddy, is what one of them said. And I said, well, of course you do, you know, and I just left it at that. And they've been quite good, really, but they are full on. Yeah. Because all of a sudden I'm getting to 61 and you've got 3 little ones. And I'll do all I can. I mean, if it does stay like this, well, I'll do all I can. But Justin not being particularly good in the house, you know, he's not. I did the ironing the other day and he went and done it again. Same stuff I'd ironed. And he said, well, I didn't know. I said, but couldn't you see it had been done? And I could have wept. I mean, such a silly little thing as the ironing been done twice, but I could have, well, I did. I want her to come back somehow so she knows the children, Justin, and be able to enjoy some life, if a different life probably, a different way of life. But so it's some enjoyment so she can know them and she can love them and she can do things with them, even if that's from a wheelchair or anything, which we'd get round all that.
Has there ever been a time when you've thought, I wish that Becky hadn't survived?
No. You just hang on to all those little threads and just hope that, you know, things just keep going up.
It's been 5 months since Sam died.
You don't expect to sort of bury your kids before you die. They're supposed to bury you. That's the way it's supposed to work. But life ain't like that, is it? Say now, I'd say any part of Sam alive would have been better. But at the time when my emotions were all over the place, my mind told me that she wouldn't want to be a cabbage, and that. But when you've lost completely and had a few months to sort of have to deal with it, you'd still rather have a little bit, if you know what I mean. You still have that body, and I don't know, just something to hug, and you could hug her, and she could sort of just understand what you were doing. Then I'd love that now, if you know what I mean. You could love her as much as what you did before. Like, it would have been the same Sam, and there would be lots of changes, but you would have dealt with them one way or the other.
Richard has been in the neurocritical care unit for 6 months. This morning, Professor Menon finally asked him the question he's wanted to ask since he first saw Richard's eyes move.
I was with Richard, and he was quite alert and engaged. And I was able to have essentially a conversation with him in very rudimentary terms, but for the first time I felt it was a conversation. And I went through several steps. The first was to check that he actually had memory of recent events, and he remembered that an ex-girlfriend had been to see him the day before and could identify the person, so clearly he could remember things. He remembered that he'd had an accident and that I'd told him that he'd had an accident, which was the first time he had that memory. And then he was aware of the fact that he was being treated on an artificial ventilator and being fed through a tube going into his stomach, and that this was likely to go on for some time. I didn't specify how long. And then finally I asked him whether he was happy for us to continue treating him, and he said yes. And I asked him again, and on 3 occasions he made it clear, just with yes/no answers, that this was a consistent response.
He keeps looking every time you do that, he looks at you. And he smiles a bit more, because that's a bit more of a smile.
Now your objectives may change. For him, the big thing may be to watch these two grow up, have boyfriends, children. I know it's a bit embarrassing to talk about it, but to be able to do that may be something that he would really value.
We all sit round and talk in the pub or at work or whatever and say, if this happened to me, if that happened to me, turn the machine off, do this, do that. It's all hypothetical, and you don't know till it happens to yourself. But as a family and friends, you perhaps sometimes, if that person can't decide for themselves, sometimes you feel that you can decide for them. And because in theory you think you could never live in that situation yourselves, you sometimes put that judgment onto somebody else, and at the end of the day you've probably got no right to do that. But now Richard's in the situation where it's actually happened, it's real life, it's not pretend. He is in that situation, and then the will to live takes over then. This Saturday we went, and as soon as we walked in, his eyes just lit up and we knew that Rich was coming back.
If you or someone you know would benefit from details of organisations which can provide help and support with bereavement, you can call the BBC Action Line on 08000 560 780. Calls are free from a landline. Mobile operators will charge. Lines are open 24 hours a day.